Okay, so I thought I'd do another Krabby Temptations video about the WBC, the World Boxing Council's ruling on Conor Benn, and also the UCAD, UK Anti-Doping, and the British Boxing Board of Control response to the news that the WBC have apparently accepted Conor's evidence, his dossier that he's handed in. And it was interesting. I haven't got all the quotes in front of me, but I do remember all the salient points, and feel free to go away and double check what I'm saying if you dispute any of it. Just the potted summary of this is that Conor Benn was found on two tests that I think certainly the first one was done under the clean boxing programme by the WBC, so that's how they are involved in it. I don't know if both of them were that, but that was the WBC connection, their clean boxing programme, which they administer through VADA. And he tested positive for clomiphene, which is a female fertility drug. And the way it works is it's a selective estrogen receptor antagonist, which means it blocks the receptors on the hypothalamus and on the pituitary gland from estrogen in women or testosterone in men, causing a negative feedback and turning off the production of that end hormone from the ovaries or from the testes. So normally what happens is there's a releasing hormone released by the hypothalamus, which is low down in the brain. This goes into the pituitary gland, and the pituitary releases two stimulating hormones called FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. And in women, they're responsible for regulating ovulation and the menstrual cycle. But in men, this LH and TSH are responsible for causing the testicles to release testosterone, which clearly very useful in building up masculine type qualities. And it affects gene transcription, so in the nucleus, so it allows the laying down of more protein, stronger muscles. It will affect the voice, make it more deep, more gruff. It can affect the mood as well. Everyone knows about so-called roid rage. So it's a very ubiquitous sex hormone, testosterone. And clearly, if you elevate it this way, you're not elevating it directly in the sense you're not adding testosterone or a testosterone analog to your bloodstream, but rather what you're doing, you're unplugging the off switch. So normally a testosterone will feed back to the hypothalamus and the pituitary and switch off the release of those stimulating hormones. So turn off the production of testosterone, and as the levels drop, then it will get switched back on again. And then as the testosterone goes up again, it's what we call a negative feedback loop. It switches it off. So, but anyway, so in men, it's stopping this feedback. It's switching off this negative negative feedback loop, so it's switching off the off switch effectively, so you can produce many orders of magnitude more testosterone, and this is why it's not allowed. And there are problems with it, though. It's not a real easy to get away with type drugs. It seems it's got a very long half-life. I think it's 20 or 30 days, and of course for that to go undetectable in the blood plasma would be probably 5 times that. So potentially a big dose of this stuff might be detectable for nearly 5 months. So it's clearly not something easy to get away with using, which makes you think, well, maybe this was some kind of accident. Or, it's not, but it certainly has been used for cheating. This is why it's on the WADA banned list. So, World Anti-Doping Association strictly forbids it. Now, what happened here? Well, after he tested positive, and we know right before the fight, British Boxing Board of Control withdrew their sanction, didn't they? So it wasn't allowed to go ahead, that fight with Chris Eubank Jr. And then Conor Benn, it seems, was asked to come before the board. And he had some disagreement with them, and this resulted in him being disciplined by the board. And it wasn't connected directly, we've been told by Eddie Hearn, to the failed doping test. He was banned or suspended by them as a punishment for, I think Eddie Hearn said it was some sort of disrespect, or I forget the term now that he used, but Conor Benn was sanctioned immediately, punished for misconduct, I think it probably was. But so something like this, and we don't know why. I mean, my thought was maybe he was furious that it got leaked, that his failed test, and so maybe he had a go at the board when they asked him to come before them and just talk to them, or maybe he put something out in the press that embarrassed the board. We know they don't like being publicly embarrassed, and so either way. So this initial ruling by the British Boxing Board of Control that they were suspending his licence, then Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn came back and said he didn't have a licence. He hadn't reapplied for it yet, because he would just apply for his boxing licence as and when he needed it, and so his licence had lapsed. Now, getting on to the WBC, there's a clear reason here why Eddie's been so keen to focus on the WBC and not UCAD. And the reason is that the WBC are not applying the rule of strict liability. Really the opposite. So what they're actually applying is there any plausible explanation that could explain these findings? We know these findings are there, but is there possibly a way this could have happened? And of course there is. I mean, it seemed that Conor Benn used a scattergun type approach. So we haven't seen sort of their full dossier or anything, but it was mentioned in the WBC's statement that, for example, they had criticised the way the samples were taken and the way the samples were processed in the WADA, or the VADA accredited lab, which I think is at University College London, Imperial College London, whatever, I don't know. I think it is in London. And so they were not just throwing about explanations about eggs, as we'll come on to, but also that maybe the samples were taken wrong and the testing was wrong. And it would appear that they hadn't even asked for the B sample to be tested, so they assumed that it was all going to be the same, which it should be, because the way in which you do it, you pee in the brand new clean tube, and then right in front of you with their latex and nitrile sterile gloves on, the person pushes on like a bifurcation valve and literally squirts the urine through this bifurcation. So half goes in one pot, half goes in the other, and then they're both sealed with tamper-evident seals. And those are shown to work, being tamper-evident. And that's that. They go off, and I presume one of them, the B sample's probably frozen, I would have thought there, whereas the A sample goes in the queue, maybe in a fridge or whatever, to be tested. Now, the WBC came back and said, we do not accept that there was anything wrong with the testing process. We totally trust VADA. And that's right. I'm sure that they have all their protocols in order for that. And in terms of the lab, again, it's sort of WADA and VADA accredited, and UCAD use it, and they said, no, we don't accept that there's a possibility of contamination. But the Benn still tried. So this is why you can see they must be desperate, because they're going for things that, anything that could help their case. But then with their eggs explanation, again, we haven't seen how many eggs they've tested, to prove that there could be a bit of clomiphene in one. And I guess with a long half-life, it is true here that if you have a long half-life drug, it can ramp up. If you're taking little doses of it every day, it can build up and build up and build up in your body, because it's never fully excreted before you get the next dose. So this is possible. But we're talking about a lot of clomiphene. So where's that come from? It's not allowed in UK chickens, but does he, or has he said he gets his from a local farm, and maybe that farm is using clomiphene, in which case he should reveal that, because it's he could be harming the animals, could be harming humans, certainly harmed him. If this was true and he was really getting contaminated eggs, surely he'd want to sue whoever gave him these eggs, for either unknown or known contaminants, and it's cost him a ton of money. So it'd be interesting if Conor Benn believes his own explanation. But anyway, the WBC said, yes, so it's not conclusively proved that he definitely wanted to cheat. So there's a small possibility it could be related to all these eggs with clomiphene in them. And that is really, the WBC said, going forward, we'll work with him to help with his nutrition. Our nutritionist will make sure that you're able to get all the stuff you need without any more contaminants. So going forward, I imagine as well, he'll have to keep samples of different things. So for example, if he eats any more eggs, he'll probably have to keep one from each batch. Maybe, can you freeze an egg without it exploding, or does it explode? Or do something with it to try and keep it there to test it, or maybe even test it for clomiphene before he eats any from that batch. You know, there's all these things that's opened up a whole can of worms to go with his eggs. So anyway, that was the point, though. So for the WBC, they obviously want to clear him because they're all about the big fights and the big money. And we know that money is everything to them. I mean, look at the way they protect their champions, you know, because they got a cushy relationship with the PBC and that. Look how they just threw rubbish at Deontay Wilder. You know, didn't make him ever defend against anyone decent. And, you know, this kind of thing, let's not go down that road. But WBC are all about the money, and they're not about a fair, clean sport in any way, shape, or, you know, any incarnation, in my opinion. This is all my own opinion, by the way. All my own opinion. Anyway, so that was WBC. They'll work with him, but he's back in the rankings, so presumably he's cleared to fight. Where will he fight? Well, he can't fight under the British Boxing Board of Control in England, or British territory, because he'd need to reapply for his licence. He'd need to sort out whatever the misconduct was, probably pay a fine or something, and publicly apologise. But more importantly, the UCAD situation may well have to be resolved. Now, does that mean he can't fight at all in the UK? No, there is the Anglo-Irish Boxing Board, which is also a sanctioning body, and which to me seems far more professional when I've seen them than the BBBOC. We also had the Luxembourg one, when it was David Hay against Chisora, even though that was Upton Park, I believe. So other people can sanction fights in the UK, perfectly legal, perfectly okay. But the BBBOC are the ones that are probably the most experienced because they're the largest. And so for safety and for better international recognition and stuff, you know, they'd rather want to use the BBBOC. But that may not be an option because of this reason. If you read through the BBBOC's statement, they mention that they apply a standard of strict liability. And that is key, strict liability. What does that mean? Now, normally, any crime, I know that this is maybe legally not a crime, but we'll talk about like it's criminal law. In crime, you have mens rea and actus rea. Mens rea means guilty mind in Latin, okay? So I see someone over there, I think, yeah, I can rob her. She's got a handbag. She's an old granny. I can knock her over and take her money. I know it's not mine, but I want it. That's a guilty mind. And then I go over there and I shove her and I grab a handbag and run off laughing. That's actus rea. That's the guilty act. And so for most crimes, you have to have mens rea and actus rea. So, for example, I jump in a car here and I drive off and someone's like, hey, he's stolen my car. It turned out, though, that I'd been tricked and my friend had done it for a lark, and they said, actually, that car there with the keys in it, that's my car. Take it for a spin round the block. You're allowed to. And so I've hopped in it thinking it's my friend's car, and he said I can drive it around the block, but really, it's not. It's a stranger's car, and they think I'm stealing it. So I've done the guilty act, the actus rea. I've driven someone else's car without their permission. It's a theft. But I don't have the mens rea because I honestly thought I did have the permission of the owner. So would I be found innocent or guilty? Don't know. Kind of depends on what the jury feel about it. Was I being a buffoon? Should it have been obvious that I was being pranked and I'm just claiming ignorance afterwards. So it's still not black and white. The famous one, actually, is in pharmacy. The most famous strict liability offence is a dispensing error. And some time ago, there was a pharmacist who was given a suspended jail sentence because somebody had died. The police had gone round to their house and they'd looking through their medicines, thinking some of the medicines may have contributed to the person's death, and they'd found there had been a dispensing error. They had the wrong label on them, one of the boxes, and so the patient had clearly taken the wrong tablet. Now, the coroner established that this did not cause the death. It did not cause the death. However, it was clear that there were some tablets that were mislabeled. And that pharmacist, although she certainly didn't try and poison the patient, there was no mens rea. She didn't have a guilty mind thinking, I'm going to poison my patient today. No, she'd made a genuine mistake when checking. But dispensing errors are a case of strict liability, and all you need to prove is actus rea. The fact that it's done and it's wrong doesn't matter whether you did it with the best of intentions and didn't mean it to happen. I don't know if that's still the case in law, but certainly it was last time I checked, but that was some years ago. And so they apply strict liability, the BBBOC do and UCAD do, to these drug cases. So if you've got the stuff in your body, the onus is on you to prove that you have done everything you can to make sure you're clean. And if you've been victimised in some way, maybe someone's deliberately targeted you, maybe there's once in a blue moon chance of what's happening happened and you were just incredibly unlucky, you may get away with it. If they think you've used all your due diligence to make sure you haven't taken a banned substance and yet it's in your body, you may be shown leniency. But really, when it's strict liability, just having that clomiphene in Conor Benn's system is enough for him to be guilty. Clearly, the intention, whether he intended to do it or not, they'll make a determination on that, because that may well affect the sentence, how long he's banned for. Will he give up who supplied it? Where's he getting the stuff from? Who else used his same doctor or whatever, where he gets it from? It might be he can turn an informer, turn a snitch, and that might get him much more lenient punishment. So there'll be all these nuances to it, but the point is he can't just show that theoretically there's a tiny chance this could have happened from contamination. No, they'll approach it with, you are guilty, it's strict liability, you've got it in your system, therefore you're guilty. And anything, you can say in mitigation as to how it may have come about, we might take it into account when looking at your sentence. So two very different ways of looking at this. The only other thing is, we know that the BBBOC don't have oodles of money, and money can come into it too with them. Because remember with Tyson Fury, with his non-castrated eating balls or whatever it was, the fact that they were in danger of getting bankrupted, the BBOC. So in the end, they had to give him the ridiculous, and Huey as well, the ridiculous backdated ban during which he fought, and all that stuff. Total nonsense. And it's because Fury had so much money, the potential, and the case was so big that it would have just bankrupted them. So that was a big thing. And obviously Conor Benn, with Matchroom and with his family and stuff, I would have thought there'll be a great pressure there financially and legally, because these lawyers don't come cheap. So what is most likely to happen going forward? He'll probably sound them out. Eddie Hearn wants to fight in the UK, and he'd rather fight with the BBBOC, because, if you look at all the gift decisions and help that he's had over the years here, they don't care about ripping off, robbing foreign fighters and stuff. And also it is safer because they've had tragedies like with Watson and, McClellan and stuff like this in the past. They are, and more recent ones too, they are getting better with their first aid and their safety and all this. So Hearn no doubt will reach some sort of compromise, I would have thought, where maybe he fights next, maybe Conor fights next abroad, maybe even against Pacquiao, in the UAE or Abu Dhabi, whatever. Well, Abu Dhabi is part of it. Yeah, UAE, isn't it? And, while he sits out a short ban and then he can come back. So I don't know. I'm sure that they're working it out as we speak. But I mainly just wanted to get across to you the fact that in my book, this does not clear Conor Benn at all. I don't believe that there's any way he could accidentally have got this amount of this potent drug for misuse in sport into his body. And I think, the WBC was always going to clear him if they could, and he's given them a nice loophole because luckily for him, he's got tons of money, so he could pay, however many hundreds of thousands of pounds it cost for all these lawyers and scientists to come up with these plausible explanations. When I was facing something not quite like this, but I did my own research in the scientific papers, got hold of what I wanted, and was told then I couldn't tell them because I'm not a court-appointed expert, even though I had the articles, I'd highlighted what was to be said, and it just needs to be read verbatim. And unfortunately, it's all designed to screw you out of a lot of money. These kinds of things, and it's very painful when you know what the answer is and you've got it on a bit of paper and you're not allowed to say it because you're told you're not an official court reporter. Well, the expert wins. Now I shouldn't be going down this road. Right. But anyway, that's my take on it. And yeah, so we will watch with bated breath and interest. Bye.